going on, bootstrappers? All right, so I have not done a live YouTube video, I don't think ever. This is my first time, so excited to be here. Got a lot of questions that poured in over the last couple of days on my DMs, and so I was able to print those out, and then I'll go ahead and answer any questions that come in here live. So fantastic. All right, so let's just go ahead and jump in. Thank you for those of you that gave me the questions, and there were some good ones. There's some really thought-provoking ones too. Some of them were just basic questions that I think you could just, if you Googled on the internet, you would find the answers to those. But that's okay. It shows that it shows me one of two things: either you didn't know that you could Google it on the internet to find the information, or you trust me enough to give you the proper information. So either way, thank you for that. So let's just go ahead and jump on into this. So for those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Ryan Nickel. I am a real estate investor. I buy and sell properties in the Northern California region. I own properties also in other states as well. And a little bit about me. My story is that I got started when I was broke. I was dead broke. I had no money. I was on food stamps. I used to be embarrassed and afraid to tell people that story, but it's a reality. It was where I was at. It's what had happened to me, and it's what I was able to make of that situation to be where I am at today. So I came from absolutely nothing. No credit, no money, no bank financing me, no knowledge even at that regard either. So I had someone that was really helping me to jump into this and teach me what I am doing, which is also why I'm giving back out to you as well. So that's where I started. And actually one of the questions that I was asked is, where did I start investing in real estate? I started actually in Georgia. I was working in Georgia, living in Georgia, and the first property that I actually made money on was it my first property? No, it was my second property. So the very first property I ever made money on was in South Carolina. And that's actually one of the questions. One of the questions that I had was, what was your first type of transaction? So the very first type of transaction was, how do I explain this? So I had a little bit of knowledge. I learned from my mentor. My first mentor in this business taught me how to acquire the property with no money, no credit, and no bank financing. And because that's all, I didn't have any of that. Like I said, I was on food stamps. I was actually, he was kind enough to let me live in the back of his office. He had like a storage closet area, and that's where I was living. I was sleeping on the floor with a mattress and washing my clothes at a laundromat and eating, fast food, just trying to figure this business out. I had left my wife and kids in South Lake Tahoe to come to Georgia and to learn this business. And so I had a little bit of training. I had some mentor. I had him as a mentor. And basically what it was is that that first transaction is I found a seller who had some challenges financially. He was actually going through bankruptcy, and he had 11 properties, and he had this one property that just was like the biggest headache in his life. He's like, I gotta get rid of this property. So I had a seller. He was referred to me by somebody, and so it was the nephew of a lady staying in another one of his properties. So one of his tenants had a nephew, and he referred this seller to me. Said, hey, this guy's having some trouble. It's messing with my auntie. Can you help out? And so was able to negotiate with him with the help of my partner, of course, or my mentor at the time. And we were able to lock up his property with a lease with an option to purchase. So that was the type of first transaction that I did. It was a lease option. So we leased his property with the option to purchase, and we wanted the property, it was currently rented. We wanted the property delivered to us vacant. So he had to go through the eviction process because that person wasn't paying. So he evicted that person, delivered us the property vacant, and then we took it over. And then what we ended up doing was we ended up finding someone who was moving down from, I think it was New York, to South Carolina, and they had some money that they wanted to put down, and so we gave them so this lease with the option to purchase. I was able to then turn around and transfer my lease with the option to purchase to somebody else. I sold the option, basically, is what I did. So they had some money, and I transferred that paperwork to them with their rights to stay in that property and lease it until they could afford to purchase it as they got established there in South Carolina. So that was my first transaction. I made $20,000. No, I take that back. They gave me a check for $20,000. I made $15,000, and five of that was prepaid rent. So they had prepaid 5 months in advance because rent was $1,000. So that was my first type of transaction. Definitely not the easiest transaction. It was a little bit more complicated, but then again, I had a mentor who was right there, kind of looking over my shoulder, tell me, hey, this is what you got to do. This is how you do this, do that, and how to negotiate with obviously someone who was way more sophisticated than I. This landlord had 11 properties, even though he was going through bankruptcy. He had through his own efforts and willpower got to a point where he was at 11 properties. So that's how that happened. So that was my first type of transaction. Great question. All right, so second question was, can you explain or summarize your process in accomplishing your transaction? I think I just did. That's exactly what it was. And one thing I didn't tell you is how I found that property. So I'll go ahead and share that with you. So this was really audacious of me. So I jumped on Craigslist. This is 2014, by the way. So I jumped on Craigslist and I said, real estate mentor looking for apprentice. And I dubbed myself as a real estate mentor. I mean, totally, completely bogus. But I knew that I could do that with the backing of my mentor who was behind me, because he was like, hey, whatever you bring in, I will help you close. And so I had that confidence that I could go ahead and do this. So real estate mentor looking for apprentice. And so this young guy was looking for something in real estate. It's like, hey, I want to get started in real estate. I want to do this. And he saw my ad pop up. And he knew that his auntie was going through this trouble, and so that's how it all came up. He messaged me. He's like, hey, I know a seller who has 11 properties and he's going through bankruptcy and he needs your help. Can we partner on these deals? And I'm like, of course we can. So that's how that got started. So a Craigslist ad asking for a referral from somebody is how I got started. Good question. All right, next question was, the process you had to follow to obtain your first transaction, would you follow the same routes today looking back? That is a great question. Would I follow the same routes? Well, today we're in a different market. I can answer that. So back then we were in a seller's market. We were in a buyer's market. And today we are in a seller's market. In fact, I think that was someone else's question. Let me just double check here. I can't find it. I thought when I had perused through this, someone asked me, can you tell the difference between a seller's market and a buyer's market? Maybe they didn't. Maybe I just thought that they did. Well, let me just go ahead and explain that to you. So what is the difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market? And I'll come back to that question of would I go through that same process in order to get deals today. So a seller's market is when there are, how's it going, Michael? When there are more buyers than there are sellers. That's a seller's market. So you got to think about supply and demand. When you have a large amount of buyers and very few sellers, those that are at the lower end or whatever there is less of is what dictates what kind of market it is. So supply, demand, or actually this is the supply, this is your demand. So the demand is super, super high, but the supply is super, super low. And so whoever controls the supply controls the terms. And so in this case, the seller's market has all these hungry buyers that want their little property over here, and the seller can do whatever they want, which is why you're having all these bidding wars. So all these buyers are coming and they're attacking the seller, trying to get this property, and they're bidding the price up. So it is definitely a seller's market right now because inventory is scarce. So again, supply and demand, supply, demand, that's how it's going to go. So the supply is low, demand is high. You're going to have a, whatever the demand is, whatever is lower, the demand, whenever you have whether it's a buyer or a seller is lower, that is what's going to dictate what kind of market it is. So again, you have a seller's market, you have low supply, high demand, lots of buyers, not a whole lot of sellers. It's a seller's market. They can dictate the prices, they can dictate the terms. They're the ones that are in control. So when I got started, it was the reverse. We had a seller's market, buyer's market, where we had very few buyers or qualified buyers and tons of sellers. So 2014, so if you think about this, the crash happened in, gotta get rid of this phone call. So the crash happened in 2008 all the way to 2012. By 2012, we had hit the bottom of the market and was starting to go back up. So we're just 2 years out of hitting the bottom. So 2014, we're still trying to crawl out of this financial wreck that we found ourselves in. And so what was happening is all these houses were hitting the market, whether they were bank-owned foreclosures, people still in the pre-foreclosure process, people that were upside down because property values had just plummeted, and so they had these houses they're trying to sell that they couldn't do. In fact, that was the second property that I picked up, and it was a guy that had moved out of state because he owed like $50,000 more in his house, and he was making the second mortgage payment. He's like, look, man, just take this property. I don't want it anymore. You can have it. Here, I mean, just deed it to you. It's your house. You can do what you want with it. Just make the payments for me, and we're golden. So at that time, when you have, very few qualified buyers and all of these sellers, then, I mean, you can, as the buyer, you dictate what you want as far as the terms. So, of course, the sellers over here like, hey, man, just take this property from me, and I'll just give it to you. Man, we were picking up properties left and right. That's definitely that's a buyer's market. The buyer dictates the terms because the buyers are very few. And again, you think about it, that banks weren't qualifying people. They were denying people. They didn't have, if you didn't have good jobs, you didn't have credit, which I didn't at the time, which is why I had to get into creative real estate. That's what was happening. So to recap on a buyer's market versus a seller's market is you're going to have high supply of, you're going to have low supply of something and a high demand for something. Is probably what it's going to be, or a high supply for something and a low demand. So just to recap, if you're going to have a seller's market, which is what we're in currently right now today, seller's market is you have a huge demand of buyers, small supply of houses, and they're all going after it. Now, when you flip-flop that, when you have a huge supply of sellers and a small demand of buyers, then it becomes a buyer's market, and that's the difference between the two. So just keep in mind, rule of thumb basically is buyer's market are fewer buyers, seller's market is fewer sellers, and that should keep it clear for you. So if I could go back through that process again, would I do that today? Well, with that background, understanding that when I was back there, that the things were different, right? That there were tons and tons and tons and tons of inventory and properties and very, very few buyers that I could dictate my terms. I could say, hey, I know I want this house and I want this, go ahead and give me that, give it to me. In fact, that particular seller that had the house that he was $50,000 overextended basically on the value, he actually wrote me a check. I mean, it was a sizable check. It was 5 figures. And he was like, look, here is my house. In fact, I'm going to write you a check that I never have to talk to you again, and I never want to see this house as a problem in my life ever again. And, what a blessing it was, because at the time I was just getting started. I had no money, no credit. I was like, man, I'm in food stamps. Like, how do I get out of this situation? Real estate was like my savior. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the last denominator to the final frontier to build wealth is real estate. And I could do it with no money, no credit. Holy smokes, let's do this again, right? And so that was a situation. Now, reversing that to the market that we're in right now today is, do we have that opportunity? I saw your question there, Michael. I do have a mentor class. I currently have students and I mentor people right now. I'll get to that in a second, though. I'll add that to my questions. I told everyone that I would not be pitching anything on this deal, though, so I'm not going to pitch anything on this. This is just pure give on that. So if I were to do that again in this particular market, what I would do is, I am doing this actually. They're not as easy to come by, but I am doing this. Like, for example, like if I were to do a lease option again today, I would do, and I actually made a video about this recently too. There's the 5 steps you're going to do on a lease option, and this is what I did. So, to answer your question, getting started, you can definitely do this if you have no money, no credit. And so when we moved, so we lived in Georgia, and then after about a year, we decided to move back to California, where I live now. And when we moved back here, I didn't know anybody. And so what did I do? So to recap the steps, in Georgia, I got on Craigslist, made an ad, said I'm looking for someone that wants to be my apprentice in real estate, and to bring me deals, basically. Bring me deals. I will, because I have the knowledge. You have the time, or you have the resources, or the relationships. You bring me the deals. I'll go ahead and we'll partner on them, and we'll make money. So basically the recap, it was Craigslist and finding the seller and then doing the rest. So when I moved back to California, I did not have any resources. I never lived up in this area where I'm at. I'm in Yuba City, Marysville, about an hour north of Sacramento. It's just wedged in between Chico and Sacramento. Just a small do-nothing town. It's where my wife is from, so we moved to. And so here, I didn't know anybody. And the very first deal that I got here in California was from a Craigslist ad and trying to find a seller. This was 2015, almost 2016, and so bottom of the market, climbing back up. We're almost there. We're not quite at the top yet, so there's still some issues. And what I did was I just said, I didn't actually make an ad on Craigslist. What I did was I found a post on Craigslist. Craigslist now is, good luck trying to find houses. But when sellers, there's a lot of sellers, very few buyers. Sellers are going to do whatever they can to sell a house. And so this particular seller put it on Craigslist and said, look, house for sale. And he put all of his numbers out there. So it was like, geez, man. It was like, I bought it for $135. I owe $125. It needs some repairs, about $5,000 in damage. You give me $5,000, and we're good. But his original thought was $5,000 was, I will sell it to you for $130, and that's it. Well, I found out what his mortgage payment was and what people were willing to pay up in that area. And so I said, look, I'll just give you $5,000 cash right now today and take off your payments for you. And he went for it. And then I immediately sold it to somebody else who gave me $15,000. So, my total profit was $10,000 right until, hip pocket National Bank, and I was cash flowing that thing. I think I only made, because the payments were kind of on the higher side, I was like cash flowing like $87 a month, like nothing to write home about, nothing special, but I got immediate cash infusion of $10,000. And then I did it over and over and over again. In fact, this particular seller had 3 different properties. Bought that one, bought another one and sold that one, bought another one. So I actually ended up buying 3 of his properties, and then there's a 4th one that I did not buy, but what I did was I consulted with him as he was transferring ownership to his son. He wanted to know how to do it creatively with the financing and the papers and whatnot, and how to be like just, hands off. And so I did a consultant agreement with him to transfer the paperwork for his sons. Basically, he just bought documents that I had paid an attorney for. So that's what I did to get my thing. So I'll go back to the 5 things about lease options in this market. So this works in any market, by the way, up or down, buyers or sellers. And so what I look for is, one, I look for rent by owners. I'm going to look for a mom and pop landlord, someone that's maybe have a handwritten sign that says for rent and they scribble out, their address and phone number and all that jazz. Or they're going to be on Craigslist, or they're going to be on Zillow, and they're going to say, for rent. And it's not by a management company. If it's a management company, scratch that, keep moving. But when you find that mom and pop owner that say, hey, I want to rent this property, that's step 1, is to find whoever's self-managing, basically. So you're looking for someone who's self-managing. And you can do this as well. You can become more sophisticated. You can go ahead and you can pull lists, and you can see who actually is who might have, ownership, who owns property in a geographical area of like 3 or less, right? And they keep it in their own personal name. And they're not in an LLC and all of this stuff. Usually those people are going to be like self-managed. They're going to go ahead and take the management themselves. And so those are people that I would go after and I would target for lease options. And so here's what I'm looking for. So it's self-managed, and they're mom and pop, meaning they have they're not, this isn't their business, their lifestyle. This is not what they're retiring on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I would contact them and say, hey, look, I'm looking for a long-term lease. I'm looking for somewhere I can lease for as short as 2 years, maybe as long as 5 years. Is that something that you're agreeable or open to? So looking for a long-term lease. And then the third thing I say, look, I'm looking for also a situation where I can actually cover the maintenance. I'm willing to cover the maintenance up to $100 a month. Are you opposed to that? Now, I want you to think 2 things here. Think like a landlord here. Okay, one of the hardest things is to find good tenants. And then the second hard thing is for them to not destroy your property. So you're getting someone calling you up and saying, hey, I want to go ahead and rent this property from you for a long period of time, and I'm also going to take care of all the maintenance issues every single month up to like $100. That's fair. So all of a sudden, landlord's like, oh, hey, this is great. Again, what's in it for them, right? What makes it beneficial to them? So that's the second thing. So the first thing is you find the mom and pop. Second one is long-term lease, and then third one is the maintenance. And then the fourth one is if I'm willing to do this, will you go ahead and discount the rent for me for the remainder of the term? So what is that? So like, okay, let's say it's $1,500. Would you can I lease it then for 2 years at $1,400? And they may go for that, they may not. They may like, well, I don't know. Are you really going to have $100 of expenses every single month? And truthfully, you might not. So settle for like 50% of that. So like $1,450. So instead of getting a full $100 off, you're going to ask for $50 off. And they may go for that. So you're just trying to get any kind of reduction in what the rent is. And then the fifth thing is you want to make sure that they're going to keep that for the entire time too. So like, if I'm going to be doing this, can we maintain the rent level at the same amount? So for 2 years, can it stay at $1,450? Or for the 5 years, can it stay at $1,450? Because you don't want any fluctuations. You want to keep it smooth. So again, to recap, 5 things are mom and pop, your long-term lease, you're looking for a you're going to do the maintenance. Then you want ideally dollar for dollar price reduction for the maintenance, and then you want to keep the price steady for the entire time of the lease. Now you're not going to get much blowback or pushback from a landlord that's going to agree to those terms. Now this is the last one. So if they've agreed to those 5, now you got to go, oh, and by the way, I want to buy the property at today's appraised value at any time in between that 2 to 5 year window. Now, this is where you're going to get people like, oh, no, this is my retirement. You're going to get all these issues about why they don't want to do that, right? That's especially in this market because properties are appreciating, rents are going up, and so there's a lot of opportunity there for them. However, this is the big however. There are some mom and pop landlords who are hurting right now, who are really, really struggling because we've got this eviction moratorium. The CDC says, oh, you cannot evict anybody because of COVID. And they have been, we're over a year now that they have not received payments from anybody, and they are just bleeding themselves dry every single month. So what I personally would do is I'd find out when my eviction court is happening, and I'd go and I'd sit in on that eviction court hearings. And I'd take my pen, and I'd take my paper, and I'd go and I would sit there, and I would be like, okay, all right, property management company versus blah, blah, blah. All right, not that person. So-and-so management company versus, okay, not that one. Joe, landlord versus, so-and-so tenant. Oh, that's the one I'm going to pay attention to. Because now I know I got someone who's representing themselves. They have an attorney representing them, but they're not represented by they're not a management company. That's the person who I'm going to be like, hey, like right after this is over, I'm gonna write down the address, I'm gonna get their name, and then either right afterwards I'm gonna go talk to them, or I'm gonna be able to contact them, within that same day. I'm gonna pick up the phone call, I'm gonna do something, and I'll be like, hey, you know what, I was in court today, I saw this information, and are you interested in, can I take over this property for you? It's basically what you're gonna say, but you're gonna say it in different words, like, hey, I'm looking for a long-term situation, I have cash to do this and that. I can give you a deposit today. I can do this. I can take care of the maintenance. I can do this. I can do that. Would you also be interested in selling the property in the next 2 to 5 years? Because I'd be willing to also buy it as well. But in the meantime, I want to maintain and keep it, upkeep the property so that when I do buy it, it's a good looking property. That's someone that I definitely would be in contact with today. Is a landlord that is definitely hurting. So does a lease option work? Of course it does. Can it work in any market? Yeah, you just have to be creative about it. You have to be. You have to figure out, again, what is it that they're looking for? What pain can you solve from their situation? What challenges or difficulties are they facing that you are able to help resolve? That's really what it comes down to. So lease options, if we were to go back and look at my first example, I had a landlord that was, he had a tenant that wasn't paying him. He was going through bankruptcy. Big deal was he needed cash now because he's going through bankruptcy and he did not have what he needed as far as monthly expenses because people weren't paying him. The other one is today you have landlords that have people that are not that aren't paying them, and there's situations that maybe they are paying them, but they just want to get out of it because they're like, California's crazy. I don't want to be a landlord in California, and I just want to get out. And so they do get out, and you have that opportunity to go ahead and take over that management and guarantee that they're be paid every single month. How do you make money on that? Well, if they have agreed to long-term lease it to you at a discount from fair market rent and give you that option, then guess what you're going to go ahead and do? You're going to go ahead and market that option to somebody else. You're going to say, I got a property. And now you're not going to, if you got, let's say, $1,450 and market rent is $1,500, you're not going to say, hey, I got a $1,450 a month payment for you. You're going to say, I got a $1,600 a month payment with the option for you to buy this house at the end of 2 years with X amount of money down to buy this option. So it's like, hey, give me $5,000 down. I'll go ahead and give you this this option at $1,650 a month. And now guess what? You're making $200 a month. And on top of the $5,000 that you just got as a cash down payment. Or I wouldn't say cash down payment, but as an option fee, because it's not a down payment because you don't own the property. So it's an option fee. So that's one way that I actually would be doing that specifically today. It does take a lot of time and resources, but if you're just getting started, it's a great way to get started. So let me see if that answers your question here. The process you had followed to obtain your first transaction, would you follow the same routes again looking back? Yeah, it's a great way with no money, no cash to get into real estate and to control a lot of property with very little money. So definitely, if I was just getting started, I would do that. Next question that came in was, do you think the market is too saturated with investors to find a transaction? No, we're finding there's a lot of investors right now. Real estate's hot. It's hot. In fact, Wall Street's playing right now. And so Wall Street's coming and they're buying up, institutional buyers are coming in. They're just buying up bulks and bulks of properties. And we're still able to find deals. And so that's the whole thing is, it all depends on how you're finding. So is it saturated to the extent where, everyone's looking on the MLS for a deal? Oh, absolutely. Like the MLS is the last place you want to be as an investor in this particular market because you're never going to get a deal. One, because you're looking for a deal. Two, you're trying to get something below market. And three, everybody's looking at the MLS. Every single person in the world is on the MLS right now, and you're not going to be able to compete with those people. And they have deeper pockets, and they're probably a lot more desperate to get a deal than you are. They're looking for a house, not a deal. And that's a key differentiation factor, is that they're looking for something and they have an emotional value attached to that. That's their home. They're looking for something they can move into and raise their family in. Whereas you're just like, hey, I'm looking for something that's going to cash flow. And so you're not going to find that on the MLS. There are a lot of investors in my market, and I'm trying to think. When a house comes up, there's something called wholesaling. Basically, what wholesaling is you don't have the money to buy a house. Technically, you're supposed to. When you contract to buy a house, you're technically supposed to have the means to buy it, or else you're committing fraud. But let's face it, there are a lot of individuals that don't have the money to get into this situation, and they're trying to sell contracts. And so in the process, what they're doing is they'll tie up a property, and then what they'll do is they will pretend to be I don't want to even say pretend. They act much like the seller or a real estate agent, and they show the property to potential buyers, and they're looking for highest and best offers. And what they'll do is there's one guy in particular in our market. What he'll do is he'll get a property under contract, and he will have a quote unquote open house, and he lets all the investors come at the same time, and they all start bidding against each other, and he's looking for the highest price because he's trying to maximize his amount of money because he's going to buy it for X and then turn around and sell it for Y. Does that strategy work? Of course it does. Is it something that I participate in? Absolutely not. The last time I did that was about a year ago, and I saw 4 or 5 other investors that I do know, and we all showed up. We're like, what? You're all here? Nah, we're done. So we all walked away. I was like, we're not going to bid against each other. It makes no sense. We like to try to find deals that make sense to us financially, not line somebody else's pockets. So that's probably the only time that I think I've ever come in contact with another investor. Now, I've learned about other investors that wanted a deal that I actually purchased or took down after the fact, but never going head to head. Even though we're in a small community, there's more than enough opportunity. It just depends on what you're looking for, what your tastes are. Do you like to buy fixer-uppers in a rundown area? Do you like to buy, rent-ready properties? Like, what is it you're looking for? What are you looking to do? That'll determine where you're looking and who you're going to be competing against, if any at all. And so I have very little competition in some of the shallower markets that I jump into. And so because they're so shallow, but they have rich rewards. Shallow meaning there's not a whole lot of them. There are few opportunities, but man, the rewards are so rich. I don't share that very often with people because that's my little secret. I like to fish in small ponds. So definitely, I don't think the market is saturated at all. I can tell you this: if you're a real estate agent, yeah, the market is definitely saturated with agents because for the first time in I don't know how long, there are actually more agents than there are properties for sale. So you actually have more sellers or more houses for, or, excuse me, fewer houses for sale than there are agents. That just tells you how little inventory there is in right now across the United States. So, next question. Did you start your journey with minimal or no cash flow? Yeah, I think I already answered that. I was broke. I was on food stamps. I was completely just financially, you know, destitute, drained. And if it wasn't for Uncle Sam, you know, giving me that handout to help me up, or that hand up, I guess is what it really turned out to be, so I could make sure that I had food on the table for my kids, I don't think I'd be in real estate. I'd be, I don't know, doing something else, panhandling, doing something. But yeah, I had absolutely no money. And do you need money to get invested in this game? Nah, not at all. You can do it with a little creativity. You're only limited by your own creative mind. And I learned that from my first mentor. He taught me a lot of ways creatively, and then you just got to go out and explore and read and study stuff, and like, buy other, get other. I bought courses. I'm an avid reader. I'm a voracious, I guess, reader. I go through courses and materials and coaches. I mean, every year I'm leveling up, buying more courses, paying more coaches, trying to learn more stuff, going to more seminars, because there's always stuff that I'm learning from other people that are doing it differently that I hadn't thought about. I'm like, that's a great idea. Even though I have success in my business, I can go ahead and do that as well. So I think, to answer your question effectively, can I do this? Can I invest in real estate with minimal cash flow? Absolutely. Can you do it with minimal knowledge? No, you can't. You can't. It's virtually impossible for you to know what you're doing if you don't know what you're doing. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know the ins and outs of real estate. You have to know what it is that you can and can't do. You have to know what works and what doesn't work. Creative ways to get around problems. You have to know those solutions, and that's what you're paying for. So I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword. Do you need money to invest in the real estate? No, you don't. You can buy money with no money. You can buy money. You can buy property with no money down. Can you get started with no knowledge? No, you need knowledge. Whether but that's going to take money. It's going to take money and it's going to take time. Now you can shortcut the time process. Now you can go out there on your own. So again, a recap. Can I buy real estate with no money? Absolutely. Can I get invested with real estate with no money? If you don't have the knowledge, no, you can't. So you can go and you can buy books. Actually, the free way is, so if you're going to do it free, there's YouTube University, there's podcasts, there's blogs, there's different sites you can go and you can get free information. Now, keep in mind, it's as good as it's as good as what you're paying for it. So it's only as good as what you pay for. So who knows that the information's free? The heck, this is free. Who knows if what I'm telling you is right? I mean, how do you know to trust me that I'm actually giving you proper advice? I could just be, making this all up to feel good about myself, pat myself on the back, wasted, 35 minutes of my time so far. Absolutely, that could be true. Or I'd invite you to consider the opposite, that I am actually very successful and I just want to give back to individuals, which is why there's no pitch. I'm not trying to pitch anybody on this stuff. Do I have courses? Do I mentor? Of course I do. Am I going to pitch you that? No, I'm not. This is a pure give. So yes, you can do that. So I would have you keep in mind that there's an inverse relationship that's happening here. So the more time that you have to invest, and the little amount of money the least amount of money that you have, the more time you're going to have to invest as far as research and learning. So whether that's all the free stuff or putting a little bit of money into books and maybe some courses or something like that to learn. But then you got to filter through all of that stuff and see what works. What worked maybe 2 years ago might not be working what's today. What works in a buyer's market might not work in the seller's market, and vice versa. So as you go down that path from free to a little bit to more money, you're shortcutting your time. So, if you have money to invest in yourself, not specifically real estate, but invest into yourself, then yeah, you can actually shortcut that process and supercharge your results a lot faster, because now you're leveraging someone else's experience and expertise and knowledge to go ahead and get that deal a lot faster. In fact, that's one of the reasons why a lot of my coaching students came to me. They're like, look, I saw what you did in such a short amount of time with no money, no credit. Here, teach me to do the same thing. And they go off and they're doing the exact same thing. Now, what it comes down to though is, behind this real question is, hey, I don't have a whole lot of money. What would I do to get started? Completely different question versus, can I start investing in real estate with little to no money? So let me address that. Can I invest in, if I have no money to invest, what's the best way to invest, to get started in real estate? If you know what you're doing, again, if you know what you're doing, driving for dollars. Driving for dollars is probably the absolute best way, and that's what I did. So aside from Craigslist, looking for properties, and to get started, I'd say, look on Craigslist. Right now, Craigslist is not a good option for you, but I would look for the for sale by rent, for rent by owners. That's what I would do. Those are people ripe. They're ready for you. And then driving for dollars. Driving for dollars is a great way for you to basically, what you're doing is you're driving around looking for distressed properties. There's a whole university out there on how to drive for dollars, how to drive to find distressed sellers. What I would like to do is, because there's a lot of information that's tied up in that, is to just point you in the direction to go to bootstraprei.com. This is a free resource. It doesn't require, actually it does, if you consider your email not free, because you need your email to log in, but I don't actually get your email. It stays logged into the system there. I guess if I wanted to, I'd probably log into the system and pull those emails, but I don't. It's a 4-module course. It talks to you about how to identify the properties, what to look for when you're driving for dollars, because there's a lot. How to contact the owner of the property once you've identified the property. So you identify, you contact. How to evaluate the property, like what you're looking for, like what am I need, like what are potential pitfalls that are going to cost me money in time and repairs, and then 4, how to contract. So basically, that whole course, it's completely free. It's bootstraprei.com. It'll walk you through on how to identify properties, contact the sellers of those properties, or I should say contact the owners of those properties. You don't know if they're sellers or not yet. Contact the owners, evaluate what that property is worth, and then of course contract that property to buy it. Because once you contract it, then you can choose what your exit is on that. So that's what I would suggest if you're getting started, is look for rent by owners, and then look for just drive for dollars. Just start driving. I'm sure that if you stop to think about it, that there are houses that you've driven by that you're like, oh man, that house needs some help. And behind every house is a story. Behind every story is a motivation, and that's what you're trying to find. So you find that house, you got to find the story, and then you got to find the motivation of why they would want to sell. Is the motivation greater than the story? And if it is, then you have an opportunity to go ahead and contract that house and to either buy it yourself or to do something with that contract, whether it's to sell it to somebody else or to wholesale or keep it and flip it. Okay, next question that came in was, do I need a license? No, you don't actually. At least in my state, I should say, you should look for your state requirements. Illinois, I believe, is one of the states that is requiring that you have to have a real estate license. And I personally do not have a license, but I don't buy in Illinois. And that's only for wholesaling, I should say. Like, you do not need a license to go and buy a property for your own. Like, if you're going to buy the property for your own personal use and gain, you don't need a license for that. There's no reason for that. Now, if you're wholesaling, at least especially in Illinois, you're going to need a license. But if your intent is to purchase the property, which I told you about fraud earlier, like if you're going to buy the property, if you're going to contract this property, and you do have the means, or you have someone that you know that has the means that can lend you the money if needed to purchase that property, again, if it's a great enough deal, money chases the deal. That's just the reality of it. Money is chasing the opportunity. They're chasing the not the property itself. People can kill. As an investor, I couldn't care less about the property. Property is secondary to me. It's immaterial. What makes sense to me and what I'm actually purchasing is the deal. Like, what are the numbers? Do the numbers make sense? I fall in love with the numbers, not the property. And so as an investor, if you have a deal that has good numbers, I'm buying that all day long. Which is why there are some houses that I've purchased sight unseen because the numbers made sense to me. So if the numbers make sense, I will buy a house sight unseen. And most investors will too, true investors. Speculators or collectors, like, I gotta see the house, I gotta see this, then they're not truly investors because if the numbers don't make sense, then the numbers don't make sense. Now again, you get into, if the numbers make sense on paper and you go into the contract, and then of course you're going to do your due diligence. I'm not saying that at all. Like don't do due diligence. Do your due diligence. Walk the property. Inspect it. But as long as the numbers are still holding true, it's a good deal. That's your contingency. That's your way out. Your weasel clause, if you want to call it that. That's how you get out of the situation. Is like, hey, these numbers aren't accurate anymore. You said it needed this in repairs, and it actually needs this, a whole laundry list of stuff. And so you get out of it that way. So to back up though, do you need a license to invest in real estate? Absolutely not. Just like you don't need a license to buy your own house or to sell your own house. So licensing, it does hold you to a higher standard. It does give you more education. So if you're looking for that, going back to that, kind of get started in real estate with little money, go get a license. If that's something you want to do, it's like, in my state, it's like $300. Or don't get the license, but buy the books, read the books, take the courses, whatever, learn real estate that way. That's an opportunity for you. But a license is not required. Next question. What do we got here? What are the different ways to invest in real estate? Man, this is already 40 minutes. I told you I'm going to go as long as I possibly can to answer all your questions, and so I will. Okay, so, and I think we're only at, we didn't number these, but 7 of like what looks like 20, 21, 22, 7 questions so far. So we're not even halfway there, but who knows, maybe some of these are going to be redundant. I don't know. Okay, so what are the different ways to invest in real estate? Oh gosh, there are so many ways to invest in real estate. There are options. There are buying land. There are buying apartment buildings. There are buying tax foreclosures. There are buying tax deeds. There are buying distressed properties. There are buying holds. You're going to buy a rental. There are buying commercial properties. Like mall strips and like strip malls and stuff like that. There's buying single family properties. There's buying pre-foreclosures. Those are going to go before the auction. There are those buying at the auction. So you're going to buy the foreclosures at the auction steps. You're going to buy REOs. You're going to buy it at a discount from the bank. I mean, there are so many different ways to just buy the property. And then once you have it, like what's your exit strategy? Like how are you going to get rid of it? Are you going to fix it up and you're going to flip it? Are you going to keep it for generational wealth and give it to your children and your grandchildren? Are you going to turn it into a nonprofit, and are you going to turn it into an elderly care facility? Like you're going to convert like a residential living into a what do they call those? They have like, they're not halfway houses, but like Buddy's house or something like that, like a clean and sober house, nonprofit. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways for you to invest in real estate. There's let me just tell you the ways that I invest in real estate. We'll just narrow it down to that so you know what my expertise is. And if you're looking for something else, you can go that way. You can go look for someone else that has what you're looking for. So for me, the ways that I invest in real estate are I buy properties to either flip or hold long term. That's it. So I'll buy a property, throw some more money into it, fix it up, and sell it for a higher price. That's me flipping. The second way I buy property is I will buy the property and I will hold it. And it'll bring me cash flow every single month. And now I may hold it as a straight rental. I may hold it as where I have seller financed it to somebody else. So they give me a down payment. They give me, they're paying me monthly, and I'm just the bank. I'm the bank in place of the bank because I'm the bank. And they pay me monthly. That's the majority of my holdings. Are seller financed, and I'm the bank. I still do some flips today. Occasionally I will do a wholesale deal or two just for quick cash. I know I got a good deal and someone will come knocking on my door. This actually just happened to me about a month and a half ago. I had a guy, hired him, went to go clean up the property, and we were cleaning it up prior to closing on it because I wanted to get it and get going fast, because in this market, man, these houses are flying off the market fast, so I wanted to get it done quick. And he saw one of my guys over there cleaning up the house, and he contacted him. He's like, hey, who bought this house? And he's like, oh, Ryan did. And so he contacted me. He's like, hey, I want this house. And I'm like, well, I'm going to fix it up. It's worth this much to me. He's like, I'll pay you this. I'm like, it doesn't really work for me. I'm still going to make more money if I do it this way, and I can do it pretty quick because it's a pretty clean house. I'll give you this much. Okay, all right, done deal. So we were able to get that thing situated. So those are the ways that I invest in real estate. Just to recap, I buy to flip. I sometimes wholesale. Or I'll wholesale, which is basically, I'm getting at that wholesale price, close on it, do a quick little cleanup on it, which is what I was doing on that one, and then throw it on the market for the MLS and then sell it. Or I'll actually buy it, hold it, and turn it into a long-term rental or a long-term seller finance opportunity. What's a lease option and can they be used today? I think I've already answered that question as far as like, can lease options be used today? Actually, I know I answered that question. But what I don't think I actually went into detail of what a lease option is. It's really simple. So a lease option is a lease. You're leasing a property with the option to purchase it within a set time frame. So two things you have to keep in mind when you're doing a lease option is that you have to know, one, the purchase price. So that's the first one. What is the purchase price? What are you going to be buying this property for when you exercise your option, and how good is your option for? I technically will not do a lease option for anything less than 2 years. I like to go actually 3 years to give myself a buffer, because the person that I'm going to be putting into this property, because I'm not going to lease option it myself. I have my own residence. I'm going to be putting someone else in there. I'm going to give them 18 months, and at the end of 18 months, if they can't perform, then I'm going to go ahead and try to swap them out and get somebody else in there and give them another 18 months. So that 3-year window gives me at least two times at bat. 2 times to, or maybe even 12 months to really get that going. And if I can't do it, then hey, you know what? No harm, no foul. I've made money and I couldn't option the property, or I couldn't exercise that option. But that's worst case scenario. What I would do is I would option the property with the renters in place. And fortunately, I've never had to do that. I've always been able to exercise the option, or the people in the properties have been able to exercise that option. So. But that's what a lease with an option to purchase is. It's just technically, it's a lease with an option. You can actually just option the property. You don't have to lease it. You can just option it. You can have other people in there. You can just option the property, and that works too. So they're two different things. So a lease, it's just a lease with the option. So sometimes people like to combine those terms and call them lease options. It's just a lease with the option to purchase, but you can, like I said, you can have a standalone option. You don't necessarily have to lease the property. What's wholesaling, and is it illegal? We've talked about that. It's not illegal, and at least in my state, it's not. You know, refer back to your own state. I think Illinois is the only one. Wholesaling basically is where you're buying a property at a discount, and you're looking for someone who wants to pay more for it because they're. So let's look at it this way. Let's look at it low, medium, and then high. Okay. So you're buying a property low, a wholesale price, like a distributor would, for example, like you're going to go and you're going to buy, milk at the grocery store. Well, the milk is a retail price, and they're getting it from a distributor who bought it at the wholesale price from the farm itself. So you get the farm, and they're going to sell it at the wholesale price. Then you're going to have like the distributor price, and then you're going to have the retail price. So same thing happens. So milk gets sold for $1, goes to the distributor. They package it all up, and then they sell it for, so their farm is selling it for $1, distributor buys it for $1, puts their information, or they package it for let's call it, $2. So now it's $3 total that they're into it. They then sell it to the supermarket for $3, and then the supermarket sells it to you for $5. So supermarket makes $2, distributor makes $2, farm makes $1. So same situation here with the house is the wholesaler is buying the property at $1. They're buying it for $1. A flipper is going to come in. They're going to buy that property for $1, make the wholesaler whole, and then they're going to put, let's say $2 into it. And so now they're into it for, oh, hang on, my analogy is all screwed up. So I'm trying to be all smart here on camera. It's not working. So anyway, so you got the guy. He's buying it for $1. The wholesaler contracts it for $1. So the guy who's selling it gets $1. Then he sells it to the distributor, who's going to be the flipper, for $2 over that. So now he's at $3. So the flipper's going to buy it for $3, fix it up, and then sell it for $5. So that's how it's going to work. So you have the wholesaler's going to come in and contract the property for low, and then with the hopes that they got a good deal and they got good pricing, and then the flipper's going to come in and buy it for medium from whatever the wholesale is at. Flipper's going to buy it for medium, put the money into it to fix it up, and then turn around and sell it at retail. And that's how wholesaling it works. That's the broad scheme. That's the mechanics of it all. And so, when people get started in wholesaling, they don't have very much money, or they're really smart, and they've gone all the way around the entire circle, and they've come back and they realize, hey, I started off wholesaling, and then I got into flipping, and then I got into selling these properties. And I just realized there was this long process to make all this money, where I could have just come all the way back here and just start wholesaling as a corporation or a business entity acquiring mass properties and wholesaling them all day long to all these flippers and making, equal amount of money without the stress, headache, or liability. So I've seen this happen now, and this is kind of where we're going now is with our flipping. We still flip few, but we're coming back and we're doing wholesales now. So we will buy it at a wholesale price and put just a list. So we'll actually take it down and buy it, put a little bit of money into it, like just paint and clean out, and then sell it. And sometimes we can get higher than what the flipper would pay for, because someone's going to move into it and make it their home. So we're not going to get quite retail, which is it's called wholesale. So you're buying at a wholesale price, but you're selling it more like at a retail price. You're wholesaling instead of wholesaling, and they're going to move in, do some sweat equity, and then they're going to get their retail price at that point if they want to refinance or if they want to sell it, do whatever they want to do. So that's what wholesaling is you're buying it low, selling it medium to a flipper, and then they're going to turn around. The flipper's going to turn around and sell it for retail. So hopefully that answers your question as far as wholesaling, what it is and what it isn't. And you didn't get lost in my confusion of like the farm to the distributor to the retail store. So it's the same concept. It's just, tying it home to, or tying it back to real estate. All right, next question is how to find deals when there aren't many houses available. Yeah, we talked about that already, actually. Driving for dollars is the biggest way. Looking for rent by owners, for lease options is another good way. Driving for dollars. Again, if you're just now seeing this, completely free course, no strings attached. There's a 4-day or 4-module, 1 module a day release course on how to identify properties, how to contact the owners, how to evaluate, negotiate, and then also how to contract those properties. In fact, the contracts that I use, those are there in that free course there. That's a great opportunity for you. It's bootstraprei.com, and that'll give you plenty of ways to what to look for when you're driving for dollars. Do I need a realtor? No, you don't. I don't know quite what that means though. Do I need a realtor? I'm gonna assume that do you need a realtor to find the properties? No, you don't. You can do that yourself. I can tell you right now, if you're looking for an investment property and you have a realtor, you're probably not going to find it. Realtors don't have time for you. They're dealing with people that have cash, that have loans, that are looking for willing to pay more than what an investor is willing to pay for a property. The people right now are overpaying for properties, and because they're overpaying, realtors are making more in commissions. And you're saying, hey, I want to offer less. That's going to be a waste of their time. These offers are going to be rejected. Why am I going to do that? So, do you need a realtor? No, you don't. Will they work with you? Probably not. Most of them will tell you no. They're I get lost. Now, if you're a seller and you have a house to sell, of course, man, they're going to be all over you, man. They're going to be taking you to dinner. They'll be whining and dining you. They want that property because you're a hot commodity in town right now. Even then, do you need a realtor to sell that property? Probably not. I know plenty of people that have no experience in real estate, put a sign in the yard, and sold their house, for sale by owner. Are there liability and other things to watch out for as a seller? Of course there are. Definitely there are, because this is, at least in my state, California, is very litigious. And so if you screw up and don't know what you're doing, title companies are just there to be to process the transaction. They're not there to guide you across. That's what real estate agents do, is they guide you. But my personal opinion is, if you're looking to find a house and you have a realtor, not in this market. They're not going to help you. That's my personal opinion. What contracts do I need to get started? You just need a contract that says I'm going to buy this property for, it could be, you can write it on a piece of paper for all that, a napkin, for all that's concerned. Is you need to have the property address, you need to have the selling party's name, the buying party's name, and or signs. That's a key point, and or signs, because if you're not going to buy it yourself, you're going to assign it to somebody else, you're going to sell that contract, you need to make sure it says the signs, and you need to have a purchase price. Other than those 4 things, everything else is negotiable. And you definitely want to have other contingency clauses in there, but as far as a contract goes, you need to have the buyer's name and or signs, the seller's name, the property address, and the purchase price. Other than that, that's up to you, up to your state. I personally have a contract that I use. It's not the state contract, but it's not a agency contract either. I've used it for I've been doing this 6 years now. I've been using it for 6 years. That contract is available to you at bootstraprei.com. That you can go ahead and get that. I don't think I have had some complaints over the years. They don't get it immediately. No, you don't, because there's a process. You got to go through modules 1 through 4, and on the fourth one, the contract one, is actually when you get access to the contract. But it's timed release. You can only access one module per day, and then once the fourth day is passed, it's all opened up to you. So, you know, if you're one person that wants to like go through everything at the same time, just go there, log in or subscribe, whatever it is. I don't even subscribe to my own stuff. I don't know what it's like. It's probably something I should do. And you know, unlock it, and then come back 4 days later, and you'll have everything you need. You know, if you don't want the training at all, you're like, screw the training, I just want the contracts. Well, hey, there you go. There's that. Can I do this if I'm 17 and I want to be an investor? Technically, you can't own property if you're 17. So the best way to do this, if I were 17, you think about this. I don't even know if I can get into a contract at 17, because technically, if I can't buy it, can I contract it? I would find the deal. That's what I would do, is I'd go and I'd find the deal, I'd negotiate the terms, do what I can. And then when it comes time to contract, I would have a partner already lined up and say, hey, this is the opportunity. Obviously, you know, you got to trust this person, because you're not protected in any way. There's no paperwork that ties you to that property. And say, hey, these are the terms of the deals, give it to that guy, and have that person give you like a finder's fee or cut you in on it for a percentage or something like that. Just wait until you're 18, man. Get started, you know, start learning as much as you possibly can. What I personally would do is like have you talk to as many sellers as possible, and just cut your teeth. Just knowing that you can't talk to people, or you can't, you know, get properties under contract, and just like make as many mistakes as possible, so that when you hit the ground running to 18, bam, you're ready to go, and you've already like got that under your belt. That's what I would do. What's the hardest deal you've ever done? Oh. I should have read some of these beforehand. Hardest deal that I've ever done. I'll tell you about the hardest one I've ever done emotionally, and then maybe something else will pop up as far as like, you know, the toughest one. Okay, so the hardest one emotionally that I ever did was that property that when I first got started, I had very little money. I was broke. I was on food stamps. I was struggling. This was my third property that I took down in my name as an investment, and it was a family that had moved down from New York. It was another family that moved from New York. I guess South Carolina is a popular place for New Yorkers to come, and they had moved down, and this property that I had acquired was fully remodeled. To my knowledge, it had been. You know, I'm not a contractor. It's probably one of the weakest areas about where I'm at. Now that I've done some flips. I've got some basic knowledge. I still would not consider myself like an amazing like contractor or anything like that. I'm not even a contractor, so I shouldn't even say that. But I do know what it takes to do these houses. So anyway, apparently what had happened was the floor was what I thought was hardwood floor was nothing more than a polished subfloor. It was really, really weird. And so the tenant had moved in, and her grandson had come over, and I don't know how this happened, but the grandson fell through the floor. So it's a house on a raised foundation, fell through the floor up to his waist, and was crying and screaming like, ah! She refused to pay rent. She's like, I'm not going to pay this anymore until you fix these damn floors. Like, got all crazy on me and stuff like that. And now I had moved back to California, and I had just very little, like a little bit of money in my checking account at this particular time, because we had, you know, put money down on a place, and we're going, and I'm like, oh crap, like I don't have the money for this. Like, this is not something that I can do. And so emotionally, this is the one that the guy had given me a check to never have a problem with. It's like, this is my property. Do not destroy my credit. I need my credit for where I'm going. And he was military. He had to maintain his clearance. And you know, if his credit got dinged, it, you know, jeopardized his job. And so, in fact, you know, also it was my word and my integrity, because they had given me money for this property that, you know, he would never have to, you know, hear from me again, basically. And here I am in California, and I'd spent most of the money, you know, moving and buying, trying to do other different things, and, you know, living life. Probably, you know, truthfully, I was living life beyond my means at the same time. I took my family to Disneyland. You know, I went and spent some of that money, never thinking that, you know, this would happen. So here I am, and I'm like, well, I got to make these mortgage payments. And, you know, for me, this mortgage payment was more than the house that I was living in California. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is outrageous. Like, how am I going to do this? Like, it really caused me a lot of emotional and mental stress. Like, I was waking up at night, panic attacks, things like that. And so and it's across the country. I'm in California, and this is in South Carolina, mind you. So I have no legal authority, or I shouldn't say legal authority. I do have legal authority, but I had no like. I couldn't go like knock on their door and say, "Hey, can we work this thing out?" Like everything's like across the distance here, and we're getting into heating. It got heated arguments and texts and phone calls, and like I'm like, "You better pay me." She's like, "You better fix the floors." I'm like, "You bought the house," like because she bought it like as is and all this stuff, and like she doesn't want to fix it. So all of a sudden like I'm over a barrel on this one. I'm like, damn it, what am I gonna do here? So I bit the bullet and I hired Lowe's to go out there and to refloor the entire house, and it ended up costing me like $7,800. And it was $7,800 that I didn't have, so I had I had like 4 or 5 credit cards that I was putting it on, trying to stretch it out like to go all these different directions, and that was a hard deal for me emotionally, because I had like my stress level was so high, and at the time we had just found out that my father-in-law was diagnosed with cancer, and so like emotionally at home there was a lot of things that were happening, and it took me about 3 months of making monthly payments without her paying me, no payments from them at all, on top of like Lowe's to get out there and measure it. Oh, we measured it wrong, we gotta come back and measure it again. Oh, they had dogs, we couldn't go there to stay, we'll be out there next week again, because it was like in a rural area, not where like Lowe's was going to be, so like they're like an hour away, so it took a long time for them to show up and get the job done. And when they finally got it done, I was like, oh my gosh, thank you, can you pay me now? Can you give me my money? And so fortunately she did pay me back everything that she had, so that was a good thing. But man, it was so stressful. That was a very hard deal. And I would caution anyone that's getting into this business that you got to treat yourself. Of course, you got to go and you got to play, you got to have fun, but you also have to realize if you're not out there hustling to get more, that you got to keep something to set aside for rainy days. And that was something that my personality likes to spend. I like to go, oh hey, if I have $10, I'll use $10. If I have $20, I'll use $20. If I got $100, I'm gonna use $100, and I'm gonna use it all. And so having the discipline over time to like, okay, fine, every single month, a certain portion of profit goes aside for rainy day fund. Certain portion goes away for taxes. Certain portion goes away for, capital expenditures that may occur on the property. Like, hey, the air conditioner went out or something like that. So that was a hard deal for me emotionally. On the opposite side, there's a deal actually I'm going through right now. This is a hard deal where it's hard, because you got to deal with the family dynamic. So this particular property, mom died, gave the property to her eldest son. Eldest son then screws up and goes to prison, gives it to his brother, doesn't convey it properly in prison, and so oldest son still has it, but the son who thinks he owns it goes and probates the property, because when mom gave it to the son, she only gave him half of her interest, not the other half that was her husband's, because when she owned it, you got to be really careful on title. Is you can own property as tenants in common, or you can own it as joint tenants, or you can have it as sole and separate. Well, what happened was she had it as her property was only tenants in common. So what happened is when the husband died, it didn't transfer over to her. His interest just remained there for the other 5 kids. And so what happened was that property that got transferred from mom to son, from son to brother, really only transferred 50% interest. And so the other 50% is out there. So you had to go and probate the dad's estate to all of the 5 kids. So now we have one brother who owns 5% or 50%, and then the others who all own collectively 50%. So there's 5 of them, so that's 10% apiece. So one brother technically owns 60%, and then there's 40%. Well, come to find out, when the brother transferred it, who was in prison, he didn't transfer the right property, because there was 2 properties adjacent side by side. He got the legal descriptions mixed up between the APNs. So he has the assessor parcel number, the APN, how the county looks at properties. They look at legal descriptions. They go, oh, this APN is for this property, but this legal description is for this property, and it's like, it's all messed up. So we got to close this transaction. We got to clean this all up. Not only that, these siblings don't talk to each other. One of them has a child support lien. One of them is no longer capable to manage their own affairs, so they have a county conservator. The other one is has when he went to prison, he skipped out on bail on another particular bail, and he has a bail bonds that's out there. It exceeds his 10% portion in the property, and the other brothers are like all mad that he's gonna be, they're gonna have to out of their proceeds pay this. When mom had the house, she got a USDA rural loan that has a recapture on it, so now they have to recapture all the stuff. So they're seeing their profits like diminish by the minute here. Now here's the crazy part now, is because the brother who got the property from mom isn't getting anything. He's like, well, I'm not going to sign anything then, because they all have to sign in order for the property to sell. Now, you see here, if there are 5 people on title, all 5 people have to sign, or the property doesn't get conveyed, doesn't get transferred. So now that he just broke his leg, so he's in the hospital right now, and he's like, I'm not signing. And now that he realized that when he transferred the property to his brother when he was in prison, that transfer didn't count, he's like, well, hey, this is my property. So now he wants to sign, but he wants more of a share. And so now they're all fighting. So this is a crazy deal. This is a really, really hard deal. I'm fixed to make about $40,000 on this deal. However, I think I'm going to have to grease some palms of the $40,000 that I'm going to make on this deal to make this happen. Now that it's all come out in the light that one brother who thought he owns it doesn't own it, and the brother who did own it, does. And so it's like, it's crazy right now. So that's a hard deal, because I'm dealing with the family dynamic of just dysfunction. There's this dysfunction. Dysfunction is probably the best word, man. That's what's happening. So that's the hardest deal right now, year to date, that I think I've ever done, as far as the complexity of it goes, because there's a lot of moving pieces in this one, which is why I'm getting a $40,000 payday on it. I'm putting my time in for sure. So that's a tough one. Next question was, what's the best way to get started with no money or credit? I think I've exhausted that. I appreciate you guys asking these questions. Some of them are kind of redundant. The best way to get started with no money and no credit is just to go out there and lease with an option to purchase and sell those leases, or to wholesale, just to contract the property and then wholesale that property out. That's probably going to be your best bet. This is a great question. Can I partner with you? No, you can't. Not unless you have money. I've done too many freebie deals over the years. I've helped a lot of people. And no, man. I can't tell you how many times I've helped somebody only, and they've had no money invested in it, and as soon as they get the cash in hand or the check, the promise to pay me never happens. And so I don't do that anymore. I value myself way too much to do that. If you want to partner with me, bring me a deal and we can partner, but I'm not going to train you and teach you like stuff like that. I'm assuming that's what you meant. If you want to partner, like if you bring me a contract, like, hey, I got this deal, I'll either buy that contract from you, give you some money that way, or if it's like, hey, like this is a situation, this is a family member or whatever, like this is, you have skills to bring to the table, then yeah, we can partner on something like that, but you got to bring something to the table. There's just no, hey, I'll, out of the goodness of my heart, partner with you. This is what I'm doing out of the goodness of my heart, is giving my time right now and sharing this information with you. Next question was, if you had to start all over, what would you do first, and what would you avoid doing again to shortcut your way to financial bliss? Financial bliss. Oh, shoot. If I had to start all over, what would I do first? Exactly what I'm doing now. I mean, the name of my company is Bootstrap REI. I bootstrap all my stuff because it's like, it works. It's a no cost way, or a low to no cost way to find deals. That's what I would do. What would I stack a lot of my deals, actually. I didn't do that when I first started. That's what I would do to shortcut my stuff. So what I mean by stacking is, rather than just driving aimlessly around neighborhoods looking for properties that are distressed, that's a great way to get started, and that's a great way to find properties and motivation. And that's how I bought a lot of my first properties. However, it does take a lot of time, which is what I had. I had a lot of time. And just because a house is distressed, or just because a house is vacant, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to sell that property to you. That's just the condition of the property. You still got to find the motivation behind the condition. Remember the story? Got to find the motivation behind that. So that's the thing. So you have the condition of the house, the story behind the condition, like how I got there, and then the motivation, whether or not that motivation is greater than the story to change the situation, which eventually will change the house. So what I would do is I would list stack. And what I would do is, by list stacking is, so I would drive for dollars, find distressed properties. I'd also contact my county assessors and look for tax defaulted properties. And then I'd contact code enforcement, can I say that right? Code enforcement. I would find code enforcement and, houses that have like code enforcement violations on it. And then I would find, any other things that I could add to that. Maybe high equity or something like that. It's actually not necessarily something I would really consider. But if I found a property that had all three of those things, vacant, that's definitely it. So if I found a vacant, tax defaulted, code enforcement property, that's what I would do. I have software that I use. I use REI Sift. If you're interested in that, I got a discount code for you guys. You can use that. But REI Sift allows me to put all of my data into it, and it sifts through, and I find, like, boom, immediately which properties are available that I could go after and pursue. So again, to recap, that list is tax defaulted, code enforcement, vacant. I feel like there was another one. I thought there was 4. I guess just driving around to find those properties. I'd add that to the list as well. So there's some kind of level of distress. And let's say I had maybe only like 2,000, records total, or even 1,000 records total, but of those 1,000, like, 7 showed up or 5 even showed up. I'd be hitting those 5 extremely hard, because they have the highest level of possibility of converting over to a deal for you because of the motivation factor. I mean, you got tax default, which means there's an auction date that's coming. There's a looming deadline that they have to act, or they're going to lose their property. It's already vacant. They've already shown hey, I don't care about this property. They've abandoned the property. Code enforcement racking up fees every single day on that property. So, less money that's going to happen in their pocket, and then you've also identified it just by driving around. But driving around is again only an identification. I'd look at more of the county records that help you on that one. That's the way that I'd shortcut it. The other part of your question was what would I avoid doing again? I would. What would I avoid? And if you guys have any questions too, I've seen a couple more pop up here. Feel free to have them show up in the chat. What would I avoid? I tell you, this is probably what I would avoid. It would be I would avoid treating real estate investing as a hobby, like truly, like as a side hustle. I think that was probably my biggest shortcoming, was that this was just a quick way to make cash when I wanted cash, and I would treat it more like a business. I know for some people that comes naturally. They just have the entrepreneurial mindset, the business structure mindset. Not that I'm not entrepreneurial, but when it comes to structure, I can follow structure, but creating structure out of chaos, that's a bit difficult. That's my wife's strength. My wife is really good at that. I would treat my business, become more structured, because without structure you can't grow, and if you can't grow, then you're not profitable, or you don't have more profits, and you can't scale that. And that's probably been my biggest downfall as a solopreneur, single operator here, is I do a lot of it myself, and a lot of the structure that I have built has been kind of haphazard, happenstance, after the fact, rather than sitting down logically and thinking things through, like, okay, because now that I've gotten into a routine of several years of doing something, I'm having to go back, and this is actually the process I'm doing right now, is like, I'm getting ready to make my first hire. I shouldn't say that. I've had several hires. I'm getting ready to make my first hire stick because my other hires were like, hey, follow me around for a week and see how you can organize stuff that I'm just like, running around scattered on. Because I know what I'm doing. I'm very competent in what I do, but it's just like how I do it is like, and that's not fair to the people that I've hired, and I realize that. And so that's probably what I would avoid doing, is I would avoid treating it like a hobby. And I would have gotten into the idea that this is a business and had it structured more like a business to grow sooner. Next question was, any books, podcasts, or YouTube channels that you can recommend? For what? Like, what are you looking for? I recommend my YouTube channel, Bootstrap REI. There you go. It just depends. Like, I listen to a lot. I read a lot. I probably listen to a lot more than I listen. As far as podcasts go, I found podcasts to be very, I don't know, man. I listened to podcasts for a very long time, thinking that I'd find some like golden nuggets or something like that. But I found that podcasts were, and maybe they've changed over the time, but podcasts were very vague, very light on strategy and tactics, and very heavy on just storytelling, bragging, stuff like that. Like, not a whole lot of like actionable steps is what I found podcasts. But that's just me. The books. Probably the books that made the biggest impact in my life have been books on negotiation. I would say anything by David Sandler. He has a phenomenal book on how to write a seminar, or how to teach a kid to ride a bike or you can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar. That's probably one of the most profound books that I have read when it comes to selling and helping people, especially those with emotional challenges in the selling process. Like a seller who's like, hey, house is going to auction. I got the code enforcement, breathing down my neck. It's it's abandoned. It's vacant. That's probably one of the best books. There are sales trainers in real estate in the real estate industry that are out there that have taken David Sandler stuff and made it their own. Like John Martinez is one of them, or Steve Trang does that as well. Both great trainers. As I mentioned early on, I spend a lot of money developing myself, and I've been to both of their boot camps, their workshops. I've paid for their coaching, so I've done all of that with them. I didn't coach with Steve, but I did go to his workshop, and I did do, I read his book as well, Active Listening 2.0. And so those are great resources to read and understand. But if you can, go back to the source. Here's what I would say as far as Sandler goes. If you have the ability to synthesize information and to take the information and to apply it to your situation, going back to David Sandler is going to be your best source. If you do not have that vision, which is okay, some people do not. It's not a problem. It's not a dig. It's not like a ding against you. Go to John Martinez or go to Steve Trang. And they have synthesized David Sandler stuff down into real estate investing specifically. Both of them are great at doing that. So that's what I would recommend. But for me, any books or podcasts, YouTube channels, I guess, anything on negotiations, because at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. You're buying and you're selling, and you're negotiating with people. And in order to buy and to sell, you have to negotiate, and you need to get favorable terms. So that's what I would do. Next question was, do I need a partner to get started? No, you don't. You don't. I did this business for years and years and years and years and years without a partner, an official partner per se. I did have a partner. I did, and I do have a partner now, or partners, I should say. I'm in a couple different partnerships, but you don't need it to get started. What I should say though is, what is important about understanding this relationship is you need to have a clearly defined exit. So how are you going to get out of it? So you're going to get into it to get out. If you have the money yourself, then you're just going to get into it and you're going to hold it. But if you don't, you need to know who you're going to sell it to. So it's not necessarily that you have a formalized partnership, but you need to know, hey, who's someone that can buy this contract from me or can buy this property from me that is currently buying right now. So it's like, who do you know that can do that? And that's what I did. So, but you have to know what you're doing first and foremost. And so if you look at this equation, there is time and then there is money in this game, and they both come together in order to make a transaction work. So if you're just getting started, I'd say that you have the time. You have the time to go research this property, go find the seller, go negotiate, go to all these things, but you don't have the money. Well, then you're going to have a money partner, and you can call them a money partner. They're not a technical partner like in a contract, like where you have like an operating agreement or a limited partnership, an LLC or something like that. So you need to know who your money partners are, and those are easy to find. You can go to meetups when we do have them. You can go to the meetups. You can ask other investors, hey, who's buying deals right now? You can go to the title company, hey, who's doing a lot of transactions right now? They'll tell you. Or you can just go on your public records and you can see who's buying multiple properties every single month. These are your cash buyers, or they're people that have money behind them, the cash behind them, and they're just the face, and they're buying these properties. That's how, what I would do is I'd figure out who my money partners are, and then go contract the properties. However, I would not have the contracting and the identifying the properties stop you from finding the money partners, because I guarantee you, if you have a deal, especially in this market, that you will find money partners, hands down. I remember one time I posted I had already sold it, already got the contract, and had already verbally committed to a person prior to posting on Facebook. And so I posted myself with the contract in the house behind me, and it's a well-known neighborhood. And the guy could see that I had the price on the contract, and he shot me a blind offer. He says, I will pay you X for that property right now, today. No questions asked. I got a check for you. And it was like, it was more than I had accepted verbally, but because I already accepted it verbally, I'm like, I already got it verbally. But the money will follow the deals every single day. And good investors know good deals, especially in that neighborhood. It was a great neighborhood. And so, but you also have integrity too. So find out who your money partners are. But again, if you don't have, I share this with you because if you don't have money partners, just post it on social media and you'll get people knocking on your door. Especially right now, man. Especially right now. All right, what's the hardest part about getting started? Getting started. There's so much fear. There's so much pressure pushing against you to keep you stuck where you're at. Inertia is the hardest thing to break free of. And so that's the hardest part about getting started. Get out and start driving. Get out and start knocking on some doors. Get out and start, picking up the phone and start calling people. I remember the first time I went out, it was the hardest thing. I had a coach. And I said, okay, I'm going to go door knock. This is when pre-foreclosures were hot. Right now, pre-foreclosures aren't an issue because of the moratorium on foreclosures, but they'll come back. And so I set the goal. I set the intention. I set the goal. I set the goal that I was going to go knock on 5 doors. And it was on a Saturday morning. And I busied myself with other less important things, but they had to get done. I had to mow the lawn that morning. I had to wash the cars that morning. And before I knew it, the morning got away from me. I'm like, oh man, I can't do it today. So the following week came up, and this happened for like 2 or 3 weeks. The second week it was, I don't have my marketing material. I gotta rewrite this letter. This letter that I'm gonna deliver to the sellers is just not, it's not good enough. I gotta redo it. And so I spent that morning redoing the letter. The third week came, and then my coach finally said, he's like, when are you going to stop believing these lies that you're telling yourself about why you can't do it? And I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no lies. He's like, these other things are more important: mowing the lawn, washing the car, doing these things, writing letters, getting your marketing perfect so that you can give it to a seller. He's like, these are all lies you're telling yourself that are preventing you from working. He's like, you need to get out there and actually do it, because what's happening is the fear and the story is building up bigger and bigger and bigger in your head than it actually really is. Once you see that you get out there, you're going to realize that it's not that bad. Sure, you may get yelled at. Sure, maybe people might slam the door in your face, but you have to do this if you want to find more properties and grow as an investor. Because if you don't do this, you might as well hang it up. And I was like, all right. Like, I had no problem cold calling people all day long, but for me to go and knock on someone's door was like the most intimidating thing ever. And I had been a door knocker. I used to sell pest control door to door, like in Phoenix in the hot sun. Like, this was like, this is what I did. Like, door knocking is not a big issue, but now that I'm knocking on someone, because I'm trying to, like, in my mind, and this is what was happening. In my mind, I was like selling a service like pest control in the middle of the summer where there's like scorpions and like black widows and everything else. Like, yeah, this is a service. To me, I did not see myself as providing a service. And that's why it was different. That's why it was hard, because I felt like I was like pestering people, or I was coming to like, beg them, hey man, can you give me your house, please? I really need a house this month. Can you please give me your house? Or that I was like turning a knife in their wound. And so for me, like, that was the hardest thing. I did not see myself as a servant helping someone out of a bad situation. Because here's the reality. I actually went through foreclosure in 2010. I lost my house 11 years ago. We lost it the day after Christmas when my wife was pregnant with our second child. I wished to God that someone would have come to my house, knocked on my door, and said, hey, you know what? I see you're having a hard time here with your house financially. I have some solutions. Can I talk to you? Are you open to that? Can I help you? If you're not, that's okay. I begged that someone would have come to my house and helped me then. Things would have been different for me. I struggled so hard after that. Not only did I struggle financially, but I struggled emotionally and mentally as a father because I lost my house. I lost the ability to protect and provide for my kids. I wasn't able to sleep at night. I was losing weight. My wife thought I was, there's something wrong with me. I felt disgusted inside, and so our intimacy was completely torn apart. Like it was a horrible time to go through. And if someone would have come to my house to help me, I would have gladly let them in. And so I didn't realize that was the help that I was providing to these homeowners by going and knocking on their door. I just thought that I was there, to hurt them even more when actually I was going to provide them some help. I was hurting them more by not going because of the stories that I was telling myself. And so that was the hardest thing for me, was to actually get on the doorstep and actually knock. Now I knock all the time. It's like no big deal. But I remember that day, I had 5 to do. And I went, and I just went around my neighborhood. And one guy, he came, the screen door was open, so I knocked on the door. He's like, what do you want? And I was like, hey man, I'm here, I'm interested in this house. And I'm like, I want to buy the house. Can I buy it? He's like, it's already sold. It's closing next week. I was like, oh, okay, thanks. Like, as soon as he told me that, I'm like, oh, all right, thanks. Hey, have a good day. Congratulations. I'm like completely fine. I'm like, oh, okay, he's not going to shoot me, And like, I'm this non-confrontational guy, right? And there's a bunch of Harleys out front too. I'm like, oh man, dude, this is gonna be bad news. This is gonna be bad news. Hell's Angels are gonna come out. They're gonna beat me down and all this horrible stuff. So that got that one out of the way. Went around the block and I knocked on the door of a guy. And I thought, I'm gonna change my story here. So I knocked on his door, and he just cracks it a little bit. It's like, he's like looking at it, like, so he's like, here's the door. He's like, what do you want? What's this about? And now, keep in mind here, the mentality of someone who's going through foreclosure is, they're waiting for like the next shoe to drop. People are knocking on their door, collections agencies are coming, people are posting things on the door saying, hey, your house is in default. Neighbors are like talking, like they're whispering about what's going on. And so, his why, I'll tell you in a second. So I go, hey man, I apologize for showing up on your doorstep unannounced. I just saw that you're having a hard time with your house. I lost my house to foreclosure several years ago. I know what it's like. And I have some solutions I'd like to share with you. Solutions that I wish someone would have shared with me when I was going through it so I didn't have to lose my house. You got a moment? The dude like opens the door, comes out, closes it. He's like, dude, yeah, what do you got, man? How can you help me? And we talked for a long time. Comes to find out he knows someone else that I know. He doesn't want the neighbors to know because they're already talking. He wants his wife to keep it on the down low. Fortunately, he was able to get a loan modification and save his house. I wasn't able to buy it, but I was like, holy crap. Like, I related to this guy. He like ran out, closed the door. It's like, we were chatting for like a good 40 minutes. And so then I realized, I'm like, okay, it's not as bad as I thought. And so I went and did the other ones, inconsequential. Nothing really happened. But the fact of the matter is that I got out there and I did something, and it took me 3 weeks to finally build enough courage to do it. So the hardest part about getting started is getting started, for whatever the reason it may be. What do you need help with? Be more specific. And so that's the hardest part, is like mentality is, we all have these lies, we all tell these excuses, and there's a cause and there's an effect. And so, my cause was that I wasn't doing anything, and therefore the effect was I had no deals. When I started to get out there, I was the cause to get out there. I then started to have deals come. And so there's always a cause and effect. And so for you to get started, you just got to get started. Hey, Ravon, I want to help you. Just let me know specifically. Type your question up and I'll do it. Next question was, we went through the entire list. We're on our last question here. Oh my gosh. Of course I say this last one for last. I don't even want to answer this question. I should have screened these beforehand. I just like copied and pasted them. Can I work for free to learn this business? Can you work for free? I'll come back to this question. Ravon, hopefully I'm saying that right. You're looking for a small apartment complex for a group home, or a group of them. Well, yeah, so apartments are not my specialty. I do own a 5-unit, that's it. But here's what I do know is landlords, I would find apartment complexes that are not owned by corporations, that are individually owned, or maybe it's an LLC, but it's like, if you go into like your, So even if it is owned in LLC, you can go to your state licensing board, and you can find out your state register, and you can find out who owns that property. If they don't have a registered agent, they're probably doing it themselves. They're not that sophisticated. When they get larger, they don't want to be found, and so they have registered agents that are like a buffer, like a step between you and them. But if it's like their LLC and it's like, you know, listed at their home address, like there's one investor here in town, and he owns a few apartments, and he has an LLC, and his LLC is at his home address, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. So if you wanted to find that guy, I'm sure. But here's what I do know about apartments right now is I got a couple of friends that have some larger ones, and they're really hurting right now because there's not a whole lot of rents coming in, because there are a lot of people taking advantage of the COVID moratorium, or like, you know, eviction moratorium. And so, and their hands are tied. Oh, cool. So that's what I would do. I mentioned earlier about going to the actual sitting in with the eviction hearings for the courts. And so whenever your court has those, ours are weekly, and just go in and sit down and listen to the landlords that are coming in and trying to evict people. And you're going to find, you know, a smaller unit, whatever. And I would then contact that person because there's pain there. Like, they have vacancies, they have people that aren't getting out, and see if they're interested in selling. That's how I'd go about buying it. Again, I preface this, I am not an apartment buyer, so I could be completely wrong with what I'm saying. That's how I go after single families. I'm thinking that a small apartment complex owner is probably going to be the same way, that they're going to have the same mentality. They're going to treat their smaller apartment complex like it would be several family, single family residences. If you're going to get into like larger corporations issues, then that's out of my realm. So hopefully that helps. All right, last question that I got here, and then I'll take any more that come up, is can I work for you for free to learn this business? Man, like, I'd love to be cheap and just like hire out all this free help, and like, get somewhere. I've learned though over the years that you get what you pay for. I tell it to sellers all the time. Hey, you're welcome. When they're like, well, Zillow says my house is worth X, and I'm like, well, you get what you pay for. We can definitely pay for an appraisal and see what it's really worth. Oh, no. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So they're not, they don't want to put money where their mouth is. And I've been guilty of this myself. I didn't want to put money where my mouth is. I wanted free labor. And I had one guy that I taught how to go and pull the probate leads from the courthouse. This is one of the things that I was doing, was pulling probate stuff. And I still pull probates. And I taught him all these things, but because I wasn't paying him, there's no loyalty. He found someone that was going to pay him more. Like I said, hey, every deal that you do, because I'm teaching you this business, I'll pay you, it's like $500 or $1,000. It wasn't like nothing special. He found someone that was going to give him, no, it was $500. He found someone that was going to give him $1,000. And so he went and he contracted a house and he sold it to a guy for $1,000. And I'm like, man, what the heck, dude, for reals? He's like, well, yeah, it's $500 more than you're going to pay me. I'm like, but I trained you, I taught you. And so there's no loyalty there. And so I have a real hard time, can they work for me for free to learn this business? I've had people that I've trained over the years that with a promise to pay, and they went out and they got a property under contract and made some money on it. And when it came time to and I didn't contract with them, so I wasn't joint on the contract, and so I didn't get paid out of escrow or any of these things. It just was, goodwill offering and stuff like that. And I never got paid. So can you work for free? Not unless you no. So the answer is no, you can't. If you have a skill set that I want, I'll pay you. And if you live locally here where I'm at, like I mentioned earlier, I'm hiring. That's my business right now. I'm hiring. But it's not real estate related. I mean, it's like like office admin stuff. Like I need someone to tidy up, vacuum the carpets. No, it's more like, admin stuff, like make sure the marketing's going out on time, making sure that following up on our kind of like a transaction coordinator almost, but also making sure that all the mortgages are paid when they come in, all the statements are matching our all of the properties that we own, that escrows haven't gone up and all this stuff, like taxes are paid, all those things, and then also managing the close. So making sure that the sellers are meeting with the title agency, they have their appointments set, scheduled, and all that stuff. We make sure that things are flowing smoothly in our operation. So that's what we're hiring for right now, and that's it. So man, that was a lot of questions there. We've gone for 90 minutes. Looks like I have a few of you on here still. If you have any questions that did not get answered, feel free to ask right now. I'll hang out for a minute or two. If we don't get any questions, and then I'll just we'll call it a day. But if you have any questions, let me know how I can best serve you. While we're waiting for that, I think all I gotta do is press this button. Let's see. All right, so well, just as a recap here, probably the most important thing that I think we talked about is just to get started. Northern California. I live in a town called Yuba City. It's between Sacramento and Chico. So I'm about an hour north of Sacramento. But you guys can do this anywhere. The biggest thing I think is that I went over is just to get started and what to look for when you're getting started. As I mentioned, there's no pitches here. I'm not selling anything. There's no way for you to get into my private mentoring group. None of that. This is just a pure give. And along those lines, someone asked the question on how do I find these properties? How do I get started? Oh, did a question come up and I missed it? How do I do that? Oh. How do I actually see the questions when they come up? Oh, there we go. Hey, what's up, Jack? Oh, you live in the Midwest. Good for you, man. Good property prices. How to locate tax delinquent properties in Sacramento? If they're going to auction, they're going to be published on the tax assessors or county tax assessor site. However, if they're published, because that means that they've been 5 years delinquent already, that means everybody's going to be going after those properties. So if you remember from when we talked about earlier, as far as supply and demand goes, where you have a lot of buyers and very few houses, you're going to have all these buyers trying to get to the same person. It's doable, but it's also very difficult because now you're competing against everyone else. So what I would do, Jack, is, and this is what I do in my counties, is I go down to the county assessor, or you can call them up and say, hey, I want to buy the delinquent tax rolls. And thanks, Cherry Cola, if you're a real person. And so that's what I would do, man, is I would buy those delinquent tax rolls and they'll give them to you in an Excel spreadsheet. And then you can do is you can go through and you can filter those however you want. But I got all that data. And then I stack those delinquent taxes against other criteria, probates, driving for dollars, or code enforcement, whatever it may be. So yeah, great question. But you can buy it. It's very affordable. One of the counties, the cheapest I've been able to pick it up has been $30, and the most expensive has been $250. And it's funny because the county that was for $30 is a county full of like almost 200,000 people. Not a huge county. You're welcome, Jack. The county that was $250, they had like 40,000 people in the entire county. It's like, what? Like, why is it so expensive? I mean, it was ridiculous, but that's what it was. So, and I wanted it, and unfortunately, I couldn't stack it against anything else because they're so small that they don't have a code enforcement. Their courts are so archaic that there's no probates that I can go and actually like pull that information. I have to like manually know the case number, and they're going to give me the file, and I got to read the file. And I'm like, so the barrier of entry was so high that, I mean, if I were to actually hire somebody to go and do that county alone, the return wouldn't even be there because no one's buying out there. It's like a ridiculous county, like an hour away from me. And so I just thought like, I thought it'd be an easy low down, like, like low hanging fruit, and I'd pick it up. No. So, I mean, anyway. Oh yeah, so those of you that aren't familiar with, so I think the biggest thing that I shared with individuals is, the process is identifying the properties, contacting the owners of those properties, and then evaluating if it's a deal or not. And if it is a deal, to go ahead and contract it. Like once you got it under contract, that's where the game begins. That's where you're able to go ahead and start, marketing to find some buyers of that contract so you can make some money. That whole process there can be very, complex. And so I've kind of dumbed it down to just basically driving around neighborhoods looking for distressed properties and how to contact them and then how to evaluate those properties. That's my gift to you. It's completely free. If you go to bootstraprei.com, You can register there, and over 4 days, there's 4 different modules that'll come out that'll walk you through that process. Like on the 4th day, you get my contracts, and the contracts that I use currently today with those sellers. And in doing so, you can't get the contracts immediately. The way it's set up is for you to go through the process. But if you just sign up, wait 4 days, you go there, everything will be unlocked, and you can get it. So I mean that's probably the best thing for you. All right, guys, this has been fun. Any other questions that I can help you with? Again, nothing's off the table. These are all geared towards, these are beginners that how to get started questions. But yeah, as I mentioned, there was no questions off the table. All right, I'm gonna go for another 20 seconds if another question doesn't show up, just so I can say I went for 100 minutes. If not, I appreciate you guys for being here. All right, type fast. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Hey, you're welcome, Ravon. It's my pleasure. If there's anything I can do to support you, just let me know. All right, you guys enjoy your day. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the likes button and then subscribe so you can get notified of these others that come out. Hey, thanks, Jack. I appreciate you as well. All right, see you guys later.